Hey, Mark? Hello? Hello? Mark? Hey.
I'll text you.
Okay, well, we have a question for you. Mark, are you there?
Daddy!
I'll text you. I'm doing something.
Mark?
I'll email you. And then there's the infamous, you go to Trader Joe's, the grocery store, you're walking down an aisle, and you see someone that you don't want to see. What do? Oh, hey, how you doing? I was just talking over there, and then you realize while you're doing it, like you have to walk by them, so you keep on doing it, and then you wait till you're in the parking lot to get off the phone because you were actually never even on the phone. This is how we are with one another today. Many of us would prefer to tweet, DM someone on Instagram, text or email, rather than being with another human being face to face and being with them. I mean, think about it, kind of like the new mantra of millennials and Gen Z is, I'd rather text than talk. I'd rather text than talk. Why is that? I think it's because it's easier for us. We can control things when we're texting. You can carefully prepare and edit your response. Sometimes even after you send it, right? With the new iPhone iOS update, you can now edit your text. Hopefully the person hasn't seen it yet. I don't know how that works out. Even email systems, you can now edit your email that is sent. Because of screens, we don't have to be vulnerable. We can hide behind our screens. You can even rehearse your responses. I mean, how many times do you show a text or send a text to your best friend or a family member before you send it to the person that you want it sent it to because you want their opinion and feedback before you send it? Don't act like I'm the only one who does that. If you know, you know. Writing on this kind of new modern phenomenon. There's a sociologist in Santa Barbara, wish I could live there too, author Felicia Wu Song, in her book, Restless Device. And this is kind of a foretaste of our January sermon series. She provides this commentary. I find this fascinating. These devices and practices give us the ability to control and dial down other people's access to us. The face-to-face conversation, now that feels comparatively overwhelming, far too taxing, and requires too much energy. The unpredictable variables in face-to-face contexts include the risk of awkward silences, the uncertainty read on the face of our interlocutors, the delicate negotiating of dull conversation, and the fumbling for right words. Not wanting to ask too much of each other and not wanting to be beholden to others. And this line stood out to me. Texting can grant us distance, control, and convenience. It is far easier to let others publicly signal absence and unavailability with our devices than risk encountering each other and having to negotiate the delicate but deeply existential act of acknowledging or rejecting someone's presence. It's much more convenient to simply hide, flatten out, and edit away our discomforts with a few well-chosen acronyms or memes. And so MIT did a research where they found that just in the last 10 years, do you know that 40% of college students no longer feel empathy? Largely because of screens. All of this makes me wonder this. As we're all here Christmas Eve, can we consider the way that God could have come into the world? Like, let's play a little game. Let's just play this out. If the original Christmas story, what we celebrate tonight, if like instead of it happening 2,000 years ago, and yes it did, I'm not doing bad history here, but if it happened tonight, December 24th, 2022, how do you think God would come to be with us? What would it look like? Would God text you? Would God DM you on Instagram? And if he texted you, would he use an iPhone? And every iPhone user is like, yeah, he wouldn't use an Android because then it throws off the whole group texting. Yeah, all you Android people, I hope you guys get an iPhone for Christmas. Would God tweet at you? Would God use Twitter? Would he use all maximum 280 characters in one tweet? Perhaps God would Zoom or FaceTime you. Hopefully he's got this paid for Zoom account so it doesn't knock you off after 45 minutes. Would God leave you a voicemail? Your iPhone could then transcribe it so you don't even have to listen to it. You can just read his voicemail to you. And lastly, if God called you, what would the number appear as? Would it say like unknown caller? Do you answer? Ooh, yes. Here's the good news that we celebrate tonight. I am so glad that that is not the way that God came to us. God didn't come like a text message that gives him distance, gives him control and convenience. God didn't come edited. God didn't hide himself for the sake of his comfort. God didn't appear to be busy so that he could avoid us. And God didn't express his love to us through emojis or memes. The Christmas story is about a God who physically, face to face, becomes human, and he comes down to be with you. As we famously read and sing in passages and songs this time of the year, Emmanuel, which means God with us. I think in street language, you could say that God had the audacity to move into the neighborhood. Real quickly tonight, I want us to look at maybe an unusual biography of Jesus for Christmas Eve, and that is the book of John. There are 4 biographers of Jesus from the first century. John was actually written from his best friend, we think. His name was Surprise John. John chapter 1, verse 1. Here's how John introduces this baby boy Jesus to us. He says this. In the beginning was the Word. Now, the word, real quick, was just a Greco first century term that Jewish people used to refer to like the creative power, energy of God. And we find out that this word is referring to this baby boy, Jesus. So in the beginning was the Word, in the beginning was Jesus, and the Word was with God, and the Word, Jesus, was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. Jump to verse 14. The Word, this is that Jesus who created the universe, by the way, became flesh, became human, became flesh and blood. You could touch him. And he made his dwelling among us. John says, we've seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father full of grace and truth. And the last verse, we're going to jump down to verse 18 tonight. No one has ever seen God, but the only Son who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father has made him known. This one, this word, this Jesus, this God became one of us, became like you and I, the one who put the stars in place, who controls and made galaxies, went into a little wooden trough. This one who was God with God for all eternity. As Eugene Peterson translates verse 18, the modern day paraphrase, no one has ever seen God, not so much as a glimpse. This one-of-a-kind God expression who exists at the very heart of the Father, here it is, has made him plain as day. How do you make God plain as day? Verse 14, the Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. God became one of us to be with us. The Word became flesh and blood. You could taste him, smell him, touch him, and he moved into the neighborhood. I love that. God moved into the neighborhood. This is basically what another biography, Matthew chapter 1, verse 23, we already sang about this. This is another way of saying the same thing. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. He moved into the neighborhood. The message of Christmas is this: God is with you, Emmanuel. And check this out, it isn't just that God made you, though that's like powerfully true. It's not just that God thinks of you, though that's quite moving emotionally. And it isn't just that God's like above you, behind you, to your left, your right, all around you, though that blows our mind. It's that God is with you. As one article put it, by virtue of God in flesh, we know that God doesn't hover in space over us. God isn't an abstract theory. God isn't merely living in the recesses of our mind or the sentiment of our hearts. God has shown up in our midst, and I love this, to touch lepers, feast with sinners, embrace his neighbors, and even ride in the dirt. Emmanuel, God is with us, dwelling among us. The incarnation, that's a fancy word for God becoming flesh, is the revenge of the analog God against all our versions of God that render God as nothing more than just somewhere out there. God is with you. God is with you when you're in Trader Joe's. God's with you when you're in the kitchen tonight or early tomorrow morning. God is with you when you're on the dairy. God is with you when you're in the office cubicle. God is with you at 24-hour fitness. God is unbelievably with you when you're on the 91 freeway stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic. And surely God is with you when you're in line at Costco gas. He's breathed our air. He's walked this earth. God with us. I'm more convinced than ever that I think one of the biggest objections to believing in God, to following Jesus, I don't think it's, does God exist or not? Though it's a valid question to wrestle with. I think it's more so, is God actually like involved and care about my everyday existence? Like, is God in the ordinary? Is God in the details? God, do you know what it's like to have anxiety? God, do you know what it's like to be depressed? God, do you know what it feels like to be alone? God, do you know what it feels like to be gossiped and have your name thrown in the mud? God, do you know what it feels like to be abused? God, do you know what it feels like to live in politically polarizing times? God, do you know what it feels like to have a jam-packed schedule? According to John and Matthew and two other biographies, God absolutely knows. And it's because 2,000 years ago on this night that we reflect on, he became one of us to be with us. I think Christmas is God's way of saying, yes, it isn't just that I understand you, it's that I'm with you in all of it. Perhaps, as Max Lucado says, the manger is the message. The manger is the message. Here's my new favorite Christmas quote, author Anne Voskamp. This is like poetry. So God throws open the door of this world and he enters as a baby, as the most vulnerable imaginable. There is no human life form more vulnerable or dependent for survival than a baby, because he wants unimaginable intimacy with you. Think about this. What religion ever had a God that wanted such intimacy with us that he came with such vulnerability to us? What God ever came so tender that we could touch him, so fragile that we could break him, so vulnerable that his bare beating heart could be hurt? Only the one who loves you to death. Only the God who had to come back to get you. Only the God who would risk vulnerability, pay the price for your iniquity because he wanted nothing less than intimacy. It cost him everything to be with you. And here's the question for tonight. Will you spend a fraction of time just to be with him? Who wants the gift of his presence? Christmas is about God's doing whatever it takes to be with us and our doing whatever it takes to be with him. He climbed down from the throne in heaven to get to you, climb over the throes of Christmas to get to him. And so what I want to ask you tonight is what Anne asked. Will you spend just a fraction of your time to just be with him? Do you want the gift of his presence? As we remember this with us, this present, this face-to-face human God, right? And that's even like a paradox, human God in our digitally saturated world. I want to invite you to spend time with him and with others. Why? Because that's exactly what he came down here to do with you. Tonight, tomorrow, the following week, 2023, can you unplug from this easy, escapable, fake, and edited digital world to open up your life just to be with the God who already is with you, and to those nearest to you that he's made, like face-to-face, flesh and blood, moving into the neighborhood, a life of witness, undistracted, a life where presence is the best present. What God did for us 2,000 years ago, he invites us now to do back to him and to others. I'm going to end with this online article that I read last Saturday night. It's just what I want to leave you with. As we remember our analog God, and by that he means like a God that you can touch, in a digital world this Christmas, I invite you to unplug from the digital world and enjoy the blessings of connection. Turn off your smartphone, unplug the tablet, and instead add a couple of moments to that warm embrace of a loved one. Close your eyes and enjoy more deeply that bite of your favorite meal or drink. Amen to that. Laugh a little bit more loudly. Listen more carefully to the words of your favorite Christmas carol or hymn. And here it is, in the words of the psalmist, taste and see that the Lord is good. Oh, the joys of those who take refuge in him.